Is a process of increased interactions and connectedness between individuals, businesses, and governments across the world. The pandemic didn't help because it actually breaks the supply chains and actually encourage people to be even more anti-globalization. But if you look at the numbers, we have seen slowdown in exports from all the countries. And we also have seen less financial globalization in terms of cross-border investment and capital flows. The key drivers of deglobalization since 2008-2009 is partly related to the rise of populism, which itself is related to the increasing inequality driven by the hyper-globalization since the early 90s. Another reason is probably related to increased protectionist policies that we have seen around the world, in particular among advanced economies. There's also an economic reason for why globalization is losing steam. There's decreasing return to how much companies, including multinational firms, can get from engaging in global supply chains. China is actually playing a large role during the globalization period. But there's a silver lining that we have to focus on, which is after many years of globalization, China has successfully moved up the value chains, where more products as well as parts and components are now being produced in China. It also implies less international trade between China and the rest of the world. There's also less room for other countries to be engaged in global supply chains. Many supply chains that were developed mostly because of increased efficiencies and the benefits to youth workers that are paid at a much lower wage in developing countries. As I've said, individuals, governments, and companies become a lot more risk-averse, partly because they finally realize supply chains are a lot more fragile than what they have expected, partly because they realize all of a sudden they have been too dependent on the supplies from individual countries, in particular China. Global supply chains will become more fragmented and more regionalized because firms are going to focus more on just in case rather than just in time. They're going to think more about backup plans. They're not going to rely on one single supplier located in one single country. Diversification is going to be the key. Firms will continue to make money, but they will be less focused on maximizing profits and spend more time on building resilient global supply chains. It is not obsolete because I think there's still a lot for individuals and companies and economies to benefit from globalization. One very important theme in economics is called economies of scale. When people and companies can specialize in what they are good at, there will be surplus for exchanges and everyone will benefit. That said, there are winners and losers, and I think there are people who are left behind during the globalization period, and therefore I'm sympathetic to individuals and governments for their anti-globalization sentiments. But we shouldn't attribute the increase in inequality all to trade. Policies are also part of the reasons, and I think many advanced economies and also developing countries did not try to redistribute enough the gains from globalization to those who suffer during the process. We're going to see less globalization, which will affect efficiency, which may also lower economic recovery out from the pandemic. A silver lining of that is maybe countries and governments may have time to rethink about their strategies to globalization, and there will be more thoughts, hopefully, towards providing safety nets and reducing inequality that was driven to a very high level after years of globalization. Globalization is a process of increased interactions and connectedness between individuals, businesses, and governments across the world. The pandemic didn't help because it actually breaks the supply chains and actually encourage people to be even more anti-globalization. But if you look at the numbers, we have seen slowdown in exports from all the countries, and we also have seen less financial globalization in terms of cross-border investment and capital flows. The key drivers of deglobalization since 2008-2009 is partly related to the rise of populism, which itself is related to the increasing inequality driven by the hyperglobalization since the early 90s. Another reason is probably related to increased protectionist policies that we have seen around the world, in particular among advanced economies. There's also an economic reason for why globalization is losing steam. There's decreasing return to how much companies, including multinational firms, can get from engaging in global supply chains. China is actually playing a large role during the globalization period. But there's a silver lining that we have to focus on, which is after many years of globalization, China has successfully moved up the value chains, where more products as well as parts and components are now being produced in China. It also implies less international trade between China and the rest of the world. There's also less room for other countries to be engaged in global supply chains. Many supply chains that were developed mostly because of increased efficiencies and the benefits to use workers that are paid at a much lower wage in developing countries. As I've said, individuals, governments, and companies become a lot more risk-averse, partly because they finally realize supply chains are a lot more fragile than what they have expected, partly because they realize all of a sudden they have been too dependent on the supplies from individual countries, in particular China. Global supply chains will become more fragmented and more regionalized because firms are going to focus more on just in case rather than just in time. They're going to think more about backup plans. They're not going to rely on one single supplier located in one single country. Diversification is going to be the key. Firms will continue to make money, but they will be less focused on maximizing profit and spend more time on building resilient global supply chains. It is not obsolete because I think there's still a lot for individuals and companies and economies to benefit from globalization. One very important theme in economics is called economies of scale. When people and companies can specialize in what they are good at, there will be surplus for exchanges and everyone will benefit. That said, there are winners and losers, and I think there are people who are left behind during the globalization period, and therefore I'm sympathetic to individuals and governments for their anti-globalization sentiments. But we shouldn't attribute the increase in inequality all to trade. Policies are also part of the reasons, and I think many advanced economies and also developing countries did not try to redistribute enough the gains from globalization to those who suffer during the process. We're going to see less globalization, which will affect efficiency, which may also lower economic recovery out from the pandemic. A silver lining of that is maybe countries and governments may have time to rethink about their strategies to globalization, and there will be more thoughts, hopefully, towards providing safety nets and reducing inequality that was driven to a very high level after years of globalization. Globalization is a process of increased interactions and connectedness between individuals.
Satu. Okey, boleh start.
Mohon perhatian, majlis akan bermula sebentar sahaja lagi. Sila pastikan semua mikrofon telah disenyapkan ataupun dipadamkan. Hai, Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Selamat datang ke webinar Globalisasi ataupun Deglobalizasi Anjuran Pelajar Sarjana Pentadbiran Perniagaan Fakulti Arsyad Ayub UiTM Seri Iskandar. Saya, Muhammad Aiman Khairul, pengacara majlis anda pada hari ini. Sukanya saya di sini ingin mengingatkan supaya tuan-tuan dan puan-puan agar mengimbas QR code seperti yang telah tertera bagi membolehkan tuan-tuan dan puan-puan layak untuk mendapatkan sijil pada akhir majlis serta tersenarai di dalam cabutan bertuah yang telah kami sediakan. Sekiranya tuan-tuan dan puan-puan mempunyai apa-apa soalan, bolehlah berbuat sedemikian dengan menaip soalan tersebut di ruangan komen. Izinkan saya membuka majlis dengan serangkap pantun. Melayang serindik di atas permatang, merbah berkicau di hujung muara. Pemanis kata selamat datang, awal bismillah pembuka bicara. Bagi memberkati majlis kita pada hari ini yang penuh bermakna, marilah kita bersama-sama menadah tangan mengaminkan bacaan doa. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirrabbilalamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi washabihi ajma'in. Ya Allah, dengan nama-Mu yang menyembuh segala penyakit, dengan nama-Mu yang mencukupkan segala permintaan, dengan nama-Mu yang memaafkan segala dosa, dengan nama-Mu yang tidak dapat dimudaratkan oleh sesuatu, baik di bumi mahupun di langit. Dan Ia Maha mendengar dan Maha mengetahui. Ya Ghafar, maka ampunilah segala dosa-dosa kedua ibu bapa kami, para guru, saudara kami, serta sekian makhluk di alam ini. Ya Rabbana, sesungguhnya hanya kepadamu kami rasakan rasa syukur, hanya kepadamu kami menyembah dan hanya kepadamu kami memohon pertolongan. Maka Engkau berkatilah dan lancarkanlah majlis kami pada hari ini. Tiadalah sesuatu urusan itu mudah, melainkan Engkau jadikannya mudah. Dan Engkaulah yang menjadikan kesukaran itu mudah apabila Engkau kehendaki. Terangilah hati kami dengan cahaya petunjuk-Mu, sebagaimana Engkau terangi bumi ini dengan matahari-Mu selama-lamanya. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina azabannar. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Tuan-tuan dan puan-puan, hari ini kita akan berbincang berkenaan dengan globalisasi. Globalisasi. Apakah globalisasi dan apa impaknya kepada kehidupan kita? Bagi merungkai soalan ini, saya ingin memperkenalkan moderator kita pada hari ini. Beliau merupakan salah seorang pelajar sarjana pentadbiran perniagaan dan juga seorang eksekutif di Maybank Jalan Sultan Idris Shah, Ipoh. Dipersilakan Yang Amira Abdul Razak.
Okay, thank you so much Aiman for the introduction. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning to all and welcome to our Global Business Strategy Talk event. My name is Yang Amira and saya bersiaran dari Ipoh, Perak. It's a great pleasure to be here. I know we're going to have a very good discussion because we got a particularly interesting topic, which is the issue of globalization and deglobalization. Dalam erti bahasa Melayu, globalisasi atau sebaliknya. Globalisasi ini seperti yang kita sedia maklum adalah usaha dan proses yang membolehkan sesuatu aktiviti diperluaskan ke negara lain atau ke peringkat antarabangsa. Manakala deglobalisasi adalah reversal of it, which means less collaboration and interconnectivity among countries. So this issue has lately become a feature of global economics and business discussion, because some consider the world have entered a period of deglobalization since 2008 after the financial crisis, such as you can see the Brexit, President of America, the Trumpism, and much more. Whereas some say there is still a continuation of globalization, whereby we can still see interdependence among countries is still going on. Sebagai contoh, sarung tangan for medical gloves are still being exported and imported to various countries. Tetapi, it's been widely argued that the pandemic, COVID-19, with its effect on global supply chain, has increased the fear and insecurity among countries. Kalau dalam Malaysia, kita kata kita jaga kita. Tapi dalam masa COVID-19 ini, adakah masih relevan untuk kita import dan ekspor barang dan juga bersepakat dengan negara lain seperti sedia kala? So as a result, COVID-19 has intensified the deglobalization trends both at a business level and at the policy level. So we're going to look at all that this morning with our three real experts in their field. Our first panel that we have for today is a managing director for the MB Business Sdn Bhd, who has over 30 years of experience in the energy industry and currently is responsible in sourcing out the fuel nation to generate our electricity. So we welcome yang berbahagia Datuk Shamsu Ahmad who is joining us.
Thank you very much. Waalaikumsalam. Thank you very much. Nice word. Thank you very much. Yes.
Okay, so next we have our second panel, who is a registered counsellor under Board of Counsellor Malaysia, also a registered Sharia financial planner from Malaysian Financial Planning Council, and has experience in social security with Employees Provident Fund, which is EPF, for 32 years. Joining us from Kuala Lumpur, we welcome Encik Muhammad Taib. Assalamualaikum Encik Taib.
Waalaikumsalam. Terima kasih. Thank you very much.
Okay. So lastly, we have our third panel, who is an Assistant Director of Matre at Northern Regional Office with experience in international trade and industries. He is joining us all the way from Penang. So let's welcome Encik Zulkarnain. Assalamualaikum Encik Zul.
Waalaikumsalam Cik Amira. Terima kasih atas jemputan pada pagi ini.
Sama-sama. Okay. Thank you very much to Encik Zul and all of the panels for joining us today. And I look forward to a lively discussion. Yeah. So, all right. Let me start with Datuk Shamsul. Coming back to my introduction just now, if we zoom into Malaysia, our country's economic development has been strongly driven and shaped by globalization, I believe. So untuk memastikan kita ni bersedia, Datuk, untuk apa sahaja yang bakal berlaku, how can we mitigate the risk of this unpredictable business world? So I pass to you, Datuk.
All right. Thank you, Yang. Thank you. And the rest of the panel, certainly it's a pleasure to have you on the panel on board with me today. Well, let's go back to the globalization, and as we know that the world in which we live in is increasingly become more interconnected. We can't doubt about it. The whole societies, economies, political systems are becoming more intertwined as products and services are exchanged across continents. We'll see the product of China coming in, US, and you see the Europe, we exporting all sorts of products there. And organizations are continually having to adapt to this evolving landscape in order for them to survive or perish. In fact, what we see is actually what worked yesterday may not necessarily work today. This phenomenon is attributed to the globalization. There is no doubt that globalization has impacted also how leadership is practiced at a global level. And this has created challenges for many organizations and the global leaders who actually lead those corporations or organizations, right? For example, leadership in skills and practices that are relevant and effective in one country may not necessarily applies or maybe useless in another country due to differences in cultural belief and values. In my opinion, it's important for us to understand how leadership can be used effectively for them to lead their organizations, their corporations into this very borderless world in such a globalized environment. So what I'm going to share today is the term VUCA originated with the United States Army War College to describe conditions resulting from the Cold War. The VUCA concept has since been adopted throughout businesses and organizations in many industries and sectors to guide leadership and strategic planning. And awareness of these forces represented the VUCA model and strategies to mitigate the harm they might cause are integral to the crisis management and discovery panel. What you can see on the slide is actually when you talk about volatility, we are talking about the subject of fluctuations and change in terms of global market prices, from the area of politics, available resources. This has been very pertinent in the modern world. When we talk about uncertainty, we never thought how actually COVID-19 pandemic actually can affect the whole world, It started 2 years ago, and how actually it impacted, we can see the economy of very major impact on the economy of various countries all around the world. We have not talked about war and trade policies between different. You remember Brexit, how the trade policies has changed because of the Brexit between European countries. It is very, very pertinent what is happening in Brexit. There's a lot of uncertainties going on over there in the Europe during the Brexit era. We're talking about complexity. Different countries' rules and regulations, and you may see different interpretations of laws. Actually, when we deal with Indonesians, we got to understand how the Indonesians' policies, regulations and laws. When you deal with India, you got to have a different specialization in terms of understanding, talking about their values, their cultures, the climates, the tariff, how they're going to impose on certain things, on certain products. You look at ambiguity, where you look at the whether there is an emerging markets, competitions, innovations, how certain countries will portray their internal market. All those actually pose a very significant impact to the business that we're going to get into it, especially in globalization. Whenever you want to go internationally, you got to understand all this volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. But to counter that, let's go to the second slide. It's the VUCA thing also. That in order for us to counter the VUCA uncertainties, we have vision. So for us to understand the complexities of things, we got to have a very clear what we want to do. We focus on the things that really matters and that bring results. You have to have a very good understanding on a certain what are the political, economics, technological, societal value, cultural risks that is pertinent in one major country. Whenever you deal with China, especially, they've got certain different provisions, different laws, understand different laws, policies. So you got to have this understanding in order for you to work effectively, to position yourself well in those markets. And certainly, you got to have this vision, what you actually want to do, the foresight actually to looking forward. Actually, how do you going to deal with all these uncertainties, ambiguities, volatility, and of course, in order for you to be able to comprehend all those, you have to be very flexible. very agile. You know, you got to look at how new innovations and look at the process efficiency, business process efficiency within your company. So this is a very general concept that has been applied in many organizations all around the world. We in Tenaga has actually looked at this very seriously, you know, because we have the tendency, you know, the aspirations actually to go internationally, to deal with different countries, different regions, you know, organizations, you know. So all this concept actually has been taken into account whenever we do that analysis. How do we position ourselves in order for us to face all these uncertainties? And the next slide, Yang. Yeah, so what we have actually come up with, this is actually the values that TMB, we call it the reimagining values, you know. We call it reimagining cultures, where we want to embark on this culture journey, where these are the 6 core values that we have embarked on. We're talking about integrity, collaborative, professionalism, customer centricity. We talk about forward thinking and mindfulness. So we want to equip all our staff, our employees with these core values in order for us to prepare all of them actually to move forward, facing the era of globalization. We got no choice. I said we got to accept the fact that the world is being globalized. You know. You may see some deglobalization taking place, you know, because of certain reasons, you know. But sooner or later, we got to understand we don't have that much choice other than moving forward. You know, the faster people connect, you know, with the most the development of the world. When you see connectivity is not an issue anymore, everybody's getting connected through internet, you know, and you see a lot more internet of IoT era, you know, the machine learning era, and you see about many things. You know, sometimes we can just keep the pace of the changes that is happening around the world. So let's prepare ourselves with understanding and also knowledge. You know what we need to do in order for us to face those challenges that may impact our business in the future. The concept is fairly simple because it's only a 10 minutes introduction to the concept, you know. But what is important is actually doing it is much more difficult, you know. How do you deal with volatility? You know, there is a specific things that you need to do, thorough analysis, talking about volatility, talking about uncertainties. There are so many uncertainties that come into the pictures, you know. How do you deal with that? How agile you're going to be? So the concept is fairly straightforward and simple, but the most important thing is actually doing it is extremely challenging to all those who wants to go for globalization. That's my take initially, Yang, for the beginning of the session. So pass it back to you, Yang.
Yeah, thank you, Dato', for your sharing. I think VUCA might sound new to us, but actually it has been applied in many organizations, including Tenaga Nasional Berhad. So definitely other organizations can benefit from VUCA based on your sharing session.
All right.
So let's move on to Encik Talib.
Yeah.
What about in terms of financial, based on past experience, how globalization has impacted the lives of Malaysians in terms of employment, business, and financial well-being towards building a sustainable nation?
Okay, thank you yang bagi Datuk dan juga Cik Zul as a panelist. When you talk about globalization, we need flashback before the independent days lagi, whereas cara our people bekerja ataupun menjalankan aktiviti mostly based on the sara hidup lah, okay. Dan dia juga been segregate by kaum according to the activity. Pada ketika itu globalization belum lagi nampak, okay. Hanya apabila kita dah merdeka, barulah industrialization, urbanization dan sebagainya under government policy, maka kita membuka kita punya negara kepada pihak luar. Dan dalam konteks ini, dia will impacted our Malaysian living, okay, dari segi political, socio-ekonomi, financial dan sebagainya. Cuma saya nak saya nak refer to the employment setting. Kalau kita tengok, dulu sara hidup informal, kemudiannya formal, now kita pergi kepada informal. Dengan teknologi advancement, maka wujudlah apa yang kita panggil gig economy. Dalam gig economy ni, nampaknya cara Malaysian bekerja sudah berubah. Mereka working independently, not only for one employer, but several employer. Dan juga mereka ini not being protected under the social security, most of them, especially those in the inhaling industry. Okay. Jadi ini adalah kesan daripada globalization, yang mana kalau kita tengok sekarang banyak pekerjaan itu wujud kerana ada pengaruh daripada luar, pengaruh daripada luar. Maka dengan itu mau tak mau kita tak boleh elak daripada menghadapi globalization ini. Itu satu. Okay. Yang kedua, kalau kita tengok financial skill ataupun financial literacy among Malaysia ni, dia punya rate dia is only 36%. Jauh. Tapi kalau kita lihat dari aspek kesediaan orang Malaysia ini menerima produk-produk yang lebih vibrant lagi, yang lebih moden lagi, seperti Bitcoin, seperti digital currency dan sebagainya, masih lagi tidak terbuka saya lihat. Okay. Sama ada mereka ini tidak ada capabilities, ataupun mereka ini tidak ada skill. Okay. Jadi ini juga ada kait mengait dengan lower income tu tadi. Okay. Dengan kadar pendapatan yang rendah yang diperolehi oleh rakyat Malaysia. We know very fact that Malaysian about 32 million, okay, adult population ada 22 juta, yang masuk dalam market force is around 14 million, 15 million, okay. Yang actively working ni is about 7 million, okay. Jadi inilah kerangka dia, yang akan impacted Malaysian dalam erti kata perspektif globalization. Okay. Jadi saya melihat pada masa akan datang Malaysia terpaksa lebih terbuka lagi untuk kita bawa lagi banyak lagi kesan-kesan yang baik supaya rakyat kita mendapat pendapatan yang baik. Jadi dalam konteks ini, kalau kita lihat di rural area for example, ataupun even di bandar sekalipun, di PPR dan sebagainya, apakah erti globalization to them? Okay. Pada saya tak banyak yang boleh kita katakan, selain daripada mereka ini terdedah dari segi drama-drama Korea, dari segi main internet, media sosial dan okay. Tapi kalau dari aspek financial atau dari aspek menjana pendapatan, apa yang saya lihat ialah mereka ini terperangkap dengan keadaan di mana kesusahan kewangan tu tadi. Jadi financial difficulties tu masih lagi mereka hadapi, okay, most of them, okay. Walaupun kita sudah ke era globalization. Mantan Perdana Menteri, Prime Minister Dr. Mahathir di bawah polisi pandang ke timur, okay, telah membawa industri daripada Jepun ke Malaysia, maka lahirlah Proton dan sebagainya. Tetapi pada hari ini kalau kita lihat benda perkembangan ini masih lagi tidak berjalan dengan sebaiknya. Saya rasa itu dulu yang daripada saya. Terima kasih.
Sama-sama Cik Taib. Terima kasih atas perkongsian. Saya rasa globalization memang ada impact terhadap kita, dan in terms of financial, macam kita selalu dengar, don't put everything in one basket lah. So bila kita diversify, memang dia punya returns or dia punya result will be much better than kita just focus on internal kita punya ekonomi, if I'm not mistaken lah. Betul. Okay. So next, now we have heard from Encik Taib, from Yang Berbahagia Datuk in terms of energy and also financial. We would like to hear from Encik Zul on trade, export and imports. So Encik Zul, based on your experience with Matrade and the current economy, was there any sign yang menunjukkan our global trade has started to slow down before the pandemic?
Okey. Terima kasih kepada Yang Mira. So tadi permulaannya Datuk Samsul dia ada cerita pasal VUCA, yang mana ada cerita pasal volatility, uncertainty, complexity dengan ambiguity. Dan lepas VUCA yang pertama tu ada VUCA yang kedua pula, vision, understanding, clarity dan juga agility. So bila kita kata pasal trade ataupun perdagangan ni, pada saya punya pendapat, Malaysia punya fokus memang terarah kepada pasaran antarabangsa, global trade. Kalau dulu permulaannya kita lebih kepada aktiviti pertanian, aktiviti pelombongan, tapi bila kita dah dengan perubahan polisi dan apa semua, kita dah berubah kepada sektor penghilangan, yang mana bila kita kata pada global ni, sebab kita tahu Malaysia ni kecil je, pasaran dia 31, 32 juta, ada 14 negeri je dalam Malaysia ni. Kalau kita nak banding dengan pasaran antarabangsa tu lagi luas kalau kita nak kira daripada jumlah populasi manusia dekat dunia yang ada 6 bilion lebih. So kalau kita nak balik kepada soalan tadi, adakah perdagangan ataupun trade dekat Malaysia ni ada kita nampak pengurangan ataupun penurunan? Sebelum dari COVID, pada saya sebelum COVID saya rasa kurang lah. Sebab kita punya, dari segi kita punya trade memang kita fokus kepada ekspor. Kalau contoh saya nak kata macam Matrade punya visi pun, kita nak meletakkan Malaysia sebagai negara global competitive trading nation. So kita memang fokus kepada ekspor. So kalau nak jawab soalan yang tadi, before ataupun sebelum COVID, dari segi untuk specifically Malaysia, pengurangan tu ataupun penurunan tu tak nampak sangat.
Okay. So bermaksud Encik Zul, sekiranya before COVID kita tak ada nampak slowing down of exporting kan, adakah lepas COVID kita nampak dia punya perbezaan tu atau masih sama?
Oh mesti. Sebab bila kita mula-mula permulaan COVID tu actually mula late hujung Disember 2019. Kira first outbreak waktu di Wuhan, China. Dan starting masuk daripada Januari kita dah mula ada detect cases dekat international gate apa semua. Dan bermula kita punya first PKP, Perintah Kawalan Pergerakan, saya ingat kita dia 18 Mac 2020. Dan kita tutup kita punya international gate, international borders. Memang waktu tu untuk dari segi ekspor berkurang. Kiranya sebab bila kita kata lagi ada, sebab waktu tu permintaan terhadap produk-produk di seluruh dunia masih lagi ada dari segi makanan, produk kesihatan macam yang saya cakap tadi, untuk permintaan untuk glove, untuk sarung tangan. Benda-benda macam tu permintaan masih ada, tapi numbers tu berkurang sebabkan dari segi kita rakyat Malaysia waktu tu ada kekangan untuk keluar bekerja. Kebanyakannya bekerja daripada rumah. Ada certain kiranya sektor perkilangan je yang boleh bekerja, Tapi itu pun dengan ada halangan, kiranya bukan dengan full capacity. Pada permulaan tu ada pergerakan, kita nak keluar rumah pun kita boleh keluar rumah untuk pergi bekerja je. Kan? Memang definitely dari segi perdagangan ada pengurangan. Cumanya bila vaksin dah diperkenalkan, rakyat pun dah mula ramai dapat vaksin, industri dibuka semula sedikit demi sedikit. Daripada situ kita dah nampak ada balik peningkatan dari segi perdagangan tadi, fokus untuk ekspor dan juga untuk import lah.
Bermaksud masa COVID tengah kemuncak lah, kita punya ekspor seperti yang tadi Encik Zul bagi tahu, barang-barang medical memang in high demand, tetapi kita tak boleh produce because of contoh tadi capacity workforce has to reduce semua. So meaning kita punya policy really affects on our exports jugalah. Is that correct?
Ya. Memang kita bergantung untuk ekspor lah kalau kita kata perdagangan.
I see. Okay. Boleh tak Encik Zul sharekan apa antara lagi yang sektor yang tradable products and services yang was in high demand semasa COVID-19?
Terutamanya yang memang high demand kalau kita kata ekspor daripada Malaysia, yang pertama electrical and electronic products lah. Yang keduanya kita ada palm oil punya produk, petroleum punya produk. Tapi kalau kita kata spesifik waktu COVID ada dua item lah. Yang pertama chemicals product, yang itu guna untuk sanitizer. Kan, yang memang ada worldwide demand. Memang kiranya worldwide demand, jadi waktu menunggu untuk dapatkan produk pun agak tinggi. Dan yang kedua definitely medical glove lah, sarung tangan, yang mana memang ada, sebab Malaysia ni kita terkenal, kita ada few big companies yang produce glove. Even Top Glove pun recognized as the world biggest manufacturer. Kita ada berpuluh facility di Malaysia yang produce glove actually. So memang kalau kita kata waktu COVID, ini antara produk-produk ataupun lah.
Okay, so boleh saya mungkin last question lah untuk before kita move on to session 2. Boleh saya tanya Datuk, berapa banyak dependency energy sector kita to produce electric in terms of natural resources from other countries?
Okay, thank you Yang for the questions. Well, TNB, our country has actually adopted a diversified approach in terms of ensuring the fuel sources are actually readily the country lah. So basically, for the country, almost close to 56% is actually being powered by the thermal coal plant, in which we source it out from various countries all around the world lah. Mainly coming from Indonesia, Australia. We do get supply from Russia. Occasionally we got it from South Africa. Then we are also sourcing out from other South American countries. But again, that consists approximately on 50%. The remaining the rest is actually coming from the gas, which we got the gas from our internal sources, Petronas, and also hydro scheme. So basically, we are very dependent on other countries for sources of fuel. Mainly is actually coal lah, yang mana kita nampak kebanyakan daripada power station sini mendapatkan sources tu daripada Indonesia lah. For example, Manjung is very dependent on Indonesian coal, subbituminous Indonesian coal for their electricity generation. Other power stations use Australian, some use South Africa, and some use Russia lah. So we are very dependent. In order for us to be to be able to actually deal with these multinational companies internationally, we've got to have place ourselves well and position ourselves well in understanding the international business, trade, regulations, policies. It also involves freighting businesses, international freight business where you see, the vessels roaming all around the world, carrying our cargoes, coming back and forth from Australia, Indonesia, Russia. This requires more than what we necessary, more competencies on international trades and policies, understanding about the business. So the impact of globalization has been apparent in this sort of business where we deal with international companies, international contracting. And the volume is actually big, the volume is big. It can run to billions of dollars because, and this all depends on international market indexing, by Newcastle index, the McCloskey index and all those issues. So this is a fairly interesting area where we can see that globalization has actually impacted the way we do things, You look at, not only that, globalization has impacted almost everything that we do today. Because it's so connected and intertwined, you can easily order items from China, which we can't comprehend. And when I was there, I can't comprehend. Whenever you want to go and buy things, you go, shopping mall, brick and mortars, But now at the click of my my palm, through the phone, you can order almost everything all around the world, And that is fantastic, And every time 11, 11, 10, 10, 12, 12, Shopee and Lazada start sending all these messages of beep, 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 Shopee, Shopee, and that excites most of the ladies in Malaysia, I guess, whenever it comes to the date that will be interesting to them. And the amount of actually transactions actually gone through that is exceptionally fantastic. So we do not know what's in the future. There are many business models actually being developed to cater for these changes in the future. Certainly, technology has driven most of it. In terms of the way we do business today. They can see algorithm being developed to understand the consumer market. You notice tak bila kita start order satu barang kan, tiba-tiba barang yang lain semua yang similar nature semua keluar dekat kita punya Facebook, dekat kita punya Instagram, all those things. You think how actually they do that? So they have this machine learning and algorithms to do that for you. So if you are a cyclist, so basically all the product of cycling, actually will come up and pop up, because it's connected. So it is extremely exciting to see how business is going to be conducted in the future. But for energy sectors, we still need coal, we still need gas, for us to actually power making sure everybody is lighted up in Malaysia. Yeah.
So
pass it later.
Yeah, so in short, we still need globalization. Is that
correct? We need globalization. We can't afford that. We don't have any source of coal in Malaysia. Dulu adalah dekat Batu Arang, tapi itu pun dah tutup kan. We have some sources in Sarawak, tapi that one is mainly for our Sarawak punya internal consumption lah. But the rest of the peninsular states require imported coal actually to fuel the country. Yeah.
Okay. Since Datuk has shared on energy and then Cik Zul has shared on trade, Cik Tai, what is can I ask is deglobalization that bad? Let's say if we move towards deglobalization, wouldn't it helps our local companies, local products? Bila kita deglobalize, meaning we are focusing on our internal businesses lah. And then our citizens will support our local products and all that. So what do you think about, is deglobalization that bad?
Okay, thank you, Yang. When we want to go for independent, I heard from certain party, dia questioning, kita Malaysia ni buat jarum pun tak boleh, okay? Buat apa kita nak independent, you see? To the extent lah, that mean that kita punya know-how, our teknologi dan kepandaian kita belum sampai ke tahap itu. Itu satu. Yang keduanya, kita ada resources. okey. Kita ada minyak dan sebagainya, okey. Dan kita juga at one time negara pertanian, okey. Maknanya kalau kita menghasilkan beras kita sendiri, ternakan dan sebagainya, kita boleh survive. Tetapi masalahnya ialah berdasarkan apa yang kita tahu, kita masih lagi mengimport barangan ini daripada luar negara. Satu, kerana shortage. Yang keduanya mungkin dari segi harganya. Maknanya di sini ialah barangan kita ini dari segi competitive advantage, okay, dengan negara-negara ASEAN ataupun dunia, setengah barangan kita ini masih lagi tidak boleh bersaing di pasaran antarabangsa. Jadi dalam konteks ini, kalau you tanya saya, adakah kita nak deglobalization? Jawapannya tidak. Sebab banyak faedah daripada globalization ini. Seperti mana yang saya sebut tadi, mantan Perdana Menteri kita berusaha untuk membawa teknologi dari luar ke sini. Okay? Dan juga kalau kita lihat dari segi pasaran saham kita pun, kalau kita hanya bergantung kepada domestik investor, okay, kita punya indeks ada kemungkinan tidak boleh naik. Okay? Kita masih lagi bergantung pada FDI. Okay? Kalau kita tengok di Johor umpamanya, ada usaha sama untuk keluarkan petrochemical produk dengan Arab Saudi. Okay? Dan juga investor di Langkawi misalnya ada MOU dengan Tok Arab daripada if I not mistaken from Abu Dhabi ke apa, okay, yang akan inject duit ini. Okay? Jadi ini semua kita tak dapat tidak lari daripada membuka kita punya negara kepada pihak luar. Okay? Itu dari aspek ekonominya, okay? Dari segi aspek financialnya. Okay? Kalau kita lihat dari segi pekerjaan sekalipun, okay, kita lihat berapa ramai rakyat kita yang berhijrah, bukan yang berhijrah, yang cross over the border di Tambak Johor. Saya dipahamkan lebih kurang ada 300 hingga 400 ribu orang telah secara tiap-tiap hari telah bekerja di Singapura. Jadi kalau kita tutup dasar kita, mengencilkan diri kita, maka saya rasa kita tidak akan pergi kepada satu tahap negara maju. Dan akhir sekali, walaupun saya kata banyak faedah globalisasi ini, akhirnya ialah berapa banyak duit yang dibawa pulang oleh rakyat Malaysia. Ini sangat menyedihkan. Kalau kita tengok income bracket yang ada sekarang ni, yang dikenali sebagai T20, M40 dan B40, majoriti rakyat kita adalah dalam kelompok B40. In fact, during pandemik ini, orang yang dalam T20 juga telah pergi kepada B40. Jadi di sini kalau kita tengok apakah kesan kita menutup sempadan kita, menutup dasar keterbukaan kita ini, kita boleh lihat kesan semasa pandemik. Apabila kita tidak dapat mengeksport barangan kita, kita tak dapat bekerja dan sebagainya, pelaburan asing tidak masuk. Jadi ia memberi kesan kepada well-being of the Malaysian. Akhirnya nanti apabila pendapatan mereka rendah, dia akan efek kepada lifestyle mereka dan juga akan efek pada financial position mereka dan akan timbul masalah-masalah sosial dan sebagainya. Akhirnya kalau daripada 22 juta penduduk Malaysia ini, semuanya kalau separuh daripadanya adalah miskin, apakah ertinya globalization itu? Masalahnya di sini ialah businessman kita making a money every year, million over million, but yet they pay the salary according to our basic minimum salary. Jadi ini sepatutnya menjadi kita punya kebimbangan dan isu yang perlu ditempuh oleh pemimpin-pemimpin dan masyarakat. Terima kasih.
Sama-sama. Terima kasih Encik Taib on the session, on the sharing part. And we have 5 more minutes towards our next session, which is we're going to take 5 before we start our session 2. So just to wrap up our first session, would all the panelists agree that Malaysia memang has been globalized and will continue to globalize, and that will be the best way to move forward? Is that how I can summarize? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to take 5 for the next session. So I'll pass back to Aiman.
Terima kasih Yang Amira. Okey. Sekarang ni kita akan berehat sebentar dan kami akan bersambung lagi 5 minit. Terima kasih.
Globalization links countries together through commerce, technology, and capital flow, and encourages close cooperation between countries across the globe. But now this cooperation and global connectivity are facing some serious challenges, and many people are now asking, is this the end of globalization?
Now we are seeing the sort of localization of ideas, localization of products, localization of ideologies. I think the idea of a globalization of trying to apply one standard on all parts of the world, this is no longer valid.
The idea of globalization dates back to ancient times, when people would travel long distances in caravans to buy valuables such as spices and gold from the ends of the world and sell them back home. But it gained pace during the beginning of the 90s, when communist bloc countries isolated from the capitalist West were integrated into global economy. Especially with the advancement of technology, globalization has managed to gain momentum over the past few decades and brought the entire world together through the manufacturing, buying, and selling of goods across the world.
We recognize that trade, financial integration, and technological progress have brought vast benefits, improving living standards and lifting hundreds of millions out of poverty.
But now many critics are taking a hard look on the Western-led globalization movement and questioning whether it's fair to everyone.
The model so far of globalization has been made by people who have grasped greedily the benefits of it and left behind most of the globe.
The issue is not just globalization, it's the system that it represented. The system of a capitalism that is harsh on the poor, that doesn't include the issue of social justice as its core. A hungry capitalism, an aggressive capitalism that found a means through globalization to extend its influence and its gains, was one that was bound to fail so long as it didn't benefit the majority of populations across the world.
The system failed to distribute resources equally, but what has pushed globalization to retreat? One major factor is the rise of nationalism across the world, which is currently at an all-time high.
But there's definitely a trend towards more nationalism, and especially troubling trends towards extremism that are maybe new and could be displacing earlier trends towards globalization.
The refugee crisis that nearly brought the EU to the verge of collapse, coupled with a shrinking economy, played important roles in the rise of nationalism and xenophobia across the continent.
C'en est fini. Des illusions du globalisme naïf et des abandons du libre-échange.
US President Donald Trump took a lead role in creating protectionist policies and has been a vocal advocate of patriotism since he came into office in 2017.
We must replace the present policy of globalism, which has just taken so many jobs out of our communities and so much wealth out of our country, and replace it with a new policy of Americanism.
But despite its downhill trend, some people think globalization will continue to exist.
Globalization is unstoppable. It's all part of this mega trend. If we look at the long history of mankind with the advent of modern transportation, communication, and so on, peoples and peoples are coming closer and closer together. So there's no turning back. It's an irreversible trend.
Many people still believe that globalization is a good thing if it redistributes wealth to benefit the majority and not just the world's elites.
I think what we're looking at is not a revolution against globalism or an attempt to completely overturn it, but to kind of modify it and change it and make the political systems much more responsive to the people on the ground.
But how can that be achieved? Experts have suggested a solution. They say that globalization needs to be redefined in accordance with the needs of lower-income countries. And in addition to that, international organizations such as the IMF and the UN need to be reformed. Some suggest that the balance of power needs to change as well.
The best thing for the world is to have a multipolar and have a system where you have many powers basically putting it together, not just a single power as we have seen since World War II.
So what do you think? Will globalization evolve into the future, or is this the start of the end of globalization? Globalization links countries together through commerce, technology, and capital flow, and encourages close cooperation between countries across the globe. But now this cooperation and global connectivity are facing some serious challenges, and many people are now asking, is this the end of globalization?
Now we are seeing the sort of localization of ideas, localization of products, localization of ideologies. I think the idea of a globalization of trying to apply one standard on all parts of the world, this is no longer valid.
The idea of globalization dates back to ancient times, when people would travel long distances in caravans to buy valuables such as spices and gold from the ends of the world and sell them back home. But it gained pace during the beginning of the 90s, when communist bloc countries isolated from the capitalist West were integrated into global economy. Especially with the advancement of technology, globalization has managed to gain momentum over the past few decades and brought the entire world together through the manufacturing, buying, and selling of goods across the world.
We recognize that trade, financial integration, and technological progress have brought vast benefits, improving living standards and lifting hundreds of millions out of poverty.
But now many critics are taking a hard look on the Western-led globalization movement and questioning whether it's fair to everyone.
The model so far of globalization has been made by people who have grasped greedily the benefits of it and left behind most of the globe.
The issue is not just globalization, it's the system that it represented. The system of a capital...
Start.
Okay, Assalamualaikum. Now we are back from our 5 minutes break. We're going to continue session 2 with discussion and also Q&A session in 30 minutes. So I'm just going to jump right away. I'll go with Encik Zul. Encik Zul, can you share with us what are the top export destination for Malaysia currently?
Okay. Thank you, Yang. Okay. For export destination, the top export destination definitely for Malaysia. Let's say for 2020, the top export destination, the first one would be ASEAN countries.
Okay.
Okay, then we have
is it China?
China also. Kalau kita we go by numbers, China. Then we have USA. Also for January, September, China, USA. Then we other countries also. Tapi the biggest one would be ASEAN lah.
ASEAN, I see.
So,
in terms of your expertise lah and experience, adakah semua negara dalam ASEAN ni masih bekerjasama walaupun selepas COVID? Sebab saya ada terdengar Thailand pengeluar beras, okay? Diorang ada start reduce export of beras to other countries because diorang nak jaga country diorang lah in terms of food security. So in your opinion, adakah ASEAN masih macam collaborating as usual and tak ada changes, or is there any changes now that we have the pandemic?
Definitely ada changes lah. Definitely ada changes. Disebabkan COVID ni, memang banyak country yang tutup dia punya sempadan, tutup dia punya borders. Contohnya macam Thailand, ataupun contohnya macam Vietnam yang mana terkesan dengan teruk. Macam kita di Malaysia pada peringkat awalnya, sebab kita punya peraturan tu diketatkan supaya kita nak kawal kiranya the spread of COVID-19 ni, kita berjaya. That's how kita boleh kiranya okey sikit, dan benda tu ada turun naik lah disebabkan keadaan semasa. Tapi memang disebabkan COVID ni, ada certain negara yang kiranya untuk certain item, certain products, dia kurangkan ekspor. Kiranya kita tak boleh nak import lebih-lebih, ataupun banyak isu lah. Kalau katakan bab makanan, ada food security. Kalau kita nak tengok bab lain, macam sekarang ni contohnya isu logistik, yang mana kos harga shipment untuk penghantaran melalui kapal laut adalah sangat mahal. So ini pun menjadi juga kiranya sebab kenapa kita kurang untuk import, ataupun negara tu kurang untuk ekspor barang. Kiranya kos pun meningkat. Kiranya ada permintaan di seluruh dunia, so dia akan jadi siapa boleh bayar, dia akan dapat produk tu. Kiranya isu yang paling besar sekarang ni, antara isu yang paling besar adalah untuk kos penghantaran. Sebab harga kapal naik, nak dapatkan kontainer payah, dah dapat kontainer nak dapatkan slot payah. Kalau katakan bila pelabuhan tu ada kes COVID, pelabuhan kena tutup. Ada certain waktu pelabuhan tak buka, pekerja tak ada. Macam sekarang ni pun dia banyak faktor lah. Satu lagi, macam sekarang pun sebab dengan macam kita sekarang ni, kita dah macam Malaysia, kita ada celebrate worldwide punya festivity. Contohnya akan datang ni kita ada Christmas, lepas Christmas ada Chinese New Year, yang mana macam Datuk Samsul cakap tadi, kita dah boleh beli barang melalui mobile devices. Kita boleh order daripada worldwide. So benda tu semuanya akan meningkatkan permintaan untuk penghantaran, yang mana menyumbang kepada kelewatan dan kenaikan harga sekarang ni lah. Itu juga antara punca kenapa kiranya kurang ekspor import tadi, bukan semata-mata kepada security lah.
Tapi Encik Zul tadi ada mention kita punya kapal laut harga dah naik kan?
Ya.
Untuk kontainer and all that. Boleh share ke berapa banyak kenaikan dia?
Okey, kalau contohnya untuk sebelum COVID, untuk 40-footer container adalah 4,000 USD.
4,000 USD, okey.
Yeah. Okey, kalau last time ada waktu saya punya engagement dengan satu company, kiranya satu pengeksport di Pulau Pinang, dia share dengan saya untuk one container daripada 4K USD tadi dah pergi kepada 23,000 USD untuk satu container. So mana kos ni, bila kos naik, bergantung kepada Incoterm yang kita punya Malaysian seller pakai dengan dia punya buyer, kos tu akan ditanggung sebahagian ataupun ditanggung sepenuhnya. So benda ni akan menyebabkan terdapat kenaikan harga. Kenaikan harga ni dia akan bergerak kepada the whole global supply chain lah, global chain semua. Naik harga minyak contohnya, kalau dekat Malaysia, bila naik harga minyak sikit, dia akan naik sikit kepada produk-produk lain juga. So bila harga transport ni naik, kos logistik ni naik, yang lain pun akan naik juga. Tapi satu contoh yang saya bagi tadi, daripada 4,000 USD kepada 23,000 USD untuk satu kontainer. So ini sangat membimbangkan lah sebenarnya untuk kita punya pengeksport di Malaysia.
Okay, if I move to Datuk Syamsul, so in terms of electricity, ada kita kadang dengar takut harga elektrik naik, harga elektrik berubah selepas COVID and all that. Sebenarnya globalisasi dan deglobalisasi ni ada main peranan tak tentang kita punya harga electricity, if you may share.
Okay, ini soalan nombor satu, the fact that semua tak suka tarif naik lah. That is confirm lah kan.
Setuju.
Tak ada orang setuju, tak ada orang dengar bunyi electricity tarif nak naik, semua orang akan lompat lah kan. We get people get excited about that. So in actual fact, the electricity, because we have a mechanism di dalam sistem industri elektrik kita yang mana is a fuel cost pass through lah. Mana it depends on the international market indexes lah, in terms of what if the prices that we bought our fuel resources is actually high, then the cost actually has got to be passed through to our government and the consumers lah. But so far the government has been very 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 mindful about doing that lah. So for example, in the last 1 month we have seen the coal prices actually went up unprecedentedly very high lah. It went up to at one time close to $250 per metric ton. And that benda tu kita tak pernah tengok selama berapa tahun, selama saya ingat 20-30 tahun yang lepas, tak pernah terjadi lah. And that is mainly because of at that particular time China is actually scrambling for all the coals all around the world lah. Basically they have the informal trade dispute dengan Australia. Diorang tak nak beli coal daripada Australia. That caused a little bit of starvation ataupun lack of supply to the China market. Basically lepas tu there was a pressure by the ESG actually. ESG is actually environmental, social and governance punya initiative all around the world now, pushing because of the climate change, there was a loud cry to reduce CO2 emissions all around the world. So most of the coal mine production actually has been pushed to reduce the production, and suddenly we see Europe is actually having a difficulty in sourcing out energy. Germany is looking because they are so aggressive in their renewables initiative, and suddenly at some point of time they realized that they couldn't get enough renewables to support their generations, and they have a risk of actually getting the supply of gas from Russia, and that causes a little bit of energy crunch in Europe lah. So basically the last month or two, the last quarter of this year, we saw a slight impact on the fuel prices. You see the crude oil or most of the commodities, actually the prices went up tremendously, unexceptionally high, and that causes slightly of a panic to the whole economy. Basically this is due to the fact that post COVID-19 everybody is ramping up the economy. Basically everybody start the manufacturing, people start going back to work, the manufacturing sector has started back their operations. We saw a lot more demands, and the inability actually post-COVID is actually whatever has slowed down during the COVID period actually has not been able to cope with the surge of demands from this, and that caused even the freight. Yeah, I agree with Cik Zul. Even the freight charges is actually went up very very high, and so everybody is actually scrambling for space during in the freight business. We saw the freight business went up exceptionally high because we are sourcing the freight also to carry our coal actually from various countries, and then all this is actually impacting the economy slightly, but inshallah once correction has been made, they settle down, I think things going to back to normal, but it won't go back to the pre-COVID era where the coal prices were so low, everything's low. So basically, to answer you, the electricity tariff so far, government has been doing a good job. They have been maintaining the tariff at a very stable, and I think we Malaysian, thankfully, we have one of the cheapest electricity tariff in the world. So kita kena bersyukur pada Allah SWT. Tapi dari masa-semasa because kita kena take into account that we do rely on external sources for fuel. Bila harga arang batu, harga gas meningkat, harga pun meningkat dan tarif electricity pun mungkin akan meningkat lah. Tapi buat masa ni government masih lagi bertahan lah dengan electricity tarif yang kita ada lah. So basically our electricity industry business is very exposed to international trades, international fluctuations in terms of supply and demand. So but we'll on our side we'll do our best to mitigate whatever impact is coming to us that is going to impact the country. Inshallah, we'll try our best to manage it and give the benefit back to the people of Malaysia. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So if I may move on to Encik Taib.
Yeah.
So now that we've heard some of our expatriates from Malaysia are coming back to our country. You know, those yang bekerja di luar negara are now coming back due to COVID and other macam restrictions on employment and all that and vaccination. So if this happens in a high intense if this intensifies, so if this intensifies, does Malaysia market have enough job opportunity for those expatriates that comes back to the hometown?
Yeah, actually we talk about to bringing back the talent from abroad to Malaysia. I think whether these people they like it or don't like it, okay, they are Malaysian. Okay, cuma di mana mereka ni comfortable jadi. Okay, kalau that one you talk about those who are in the higher skill workers. Jadi even in the lower skill workers pun macam Singapore, Malaysian working in Singapore, they don't want to work in Malaysia. They don't want to work in Johor Bahru. You see. Johor Bahru itself, they ada about 1.8 to 2 million population from 4 million of Johor state. Okay. Dan kalau kita tengok kat situ, work dari in term of the guna tenaga in Johor Bahru itself, if I'm not mistaken, it's about 700,000 to 1 million saja. Okay. Yang lain-lain tu suri rumah dan sebagainya. Okay. Dan kebanyakan mereka ini, dia bekerja di Singapura. Dia tak mau bekerja di Malaysia. Kenapa dia tak mau bekerja di Malaysia? Sebab again, di Malaysia ini bukan sahaja dari segi job opportunity, tetapi dari segi willingness of the bosses, businessmen untuk pay higher salary. Okay, they are making money million and million, okay, a year, but yet they are paying based on the basic minimum salary, iaitu RM1,200, RM1,300. Dan kalau kita tengok attitude of the Malaysian ni, anak-anak muda dan sebagainya, setengah-setengah tu dia memang tak mau pergi to the workforce. Okay? Sebab gaji yang ditawarkan hanyalah RM1,500. Untuk dia nak pergi kerja dengan tambang dan sebagainya, dia take home pay dia adalah sangat rendah. So the best is ialah generating income ini, okay, lebih baik dia venture the small business ataupun dia bawa Grab. Okay. Yang ini sebenarnya satu masalah besar sebenarnya. Kalau kita tengok mungkin mereka yang kerja di luar negara itu pun agak skeptikal rasa saya untuk balik ke Malaysia. Itu saya rasa saya menjawablah soalan yang tu tadi. Okay. Yang keduanya kita tengok kejayaan globalization ini, faedah globalization ni bergantung kepada political stability. Okay. Sekiranya negara kita ini tidak stabil dari segi politik, orang pun tak akan datang. Orang pun tidak akan invest ke negara kita dan akhirnya nanti apabila peluang pekerjaan tidak wujud, okay, maka rakyat akan jadi sengsara dan dari segi well-being rakyat Malaysia, dari segi financial well-being rakyat Malaysia akan affected dan akhirnya negara akan berhadapan dengan masalah sosial yang besar, di mana sejumlah peruntukan perlu disediakan bagi memberikan bantuan kewangan kepada rakyat kita. Dan berapa lama kita akan bertahan dengan cara ini, sedangkan di negara-negara lain mereka sudah jauh ke hadapan. Jadi saya melihat globalization ini hendaklah seiring dengan cara kita mengendalikan negara kita, dari segi mindsetnya, dari segi behavioralnya, dan kalau kita lihat dari aspek cara hidup, lifestyle Malaysian pun dah berubah. Kalau kita tengok macam nak pergi melancong dan sebagainya, mereka tidak tidur di hotel. Dia ada Airbnb, Agoda dan sebagainya. Yang ini adalah bagaimana kita tengok dia syarikat-syarikat daripada luar penetrate kita punya market. Tapi kita gagal untuk penetrate market di luar. Kalau kita hanya bergantung kepada market kita saja untuk generating income, maka dengan itu kita akan gagal. Jadi bagi kumpulan B40 yang duduk di tengah bandar, mereka akan sengsara. Mereka tidak mendapat peluang untuk bergerak dan sebagainya, dan menyalahkan mereka 100% adalah tidak begitu bertepatan. Terima kasih.
Sama-sama. Plus bila I would say when our economy are diversified, definitely kita boleh cater to those expatriates coming back from home if their jobs are available abroad. But if they're coming back and that profession is not here, so so there will be a struggle for them lah. Correct?
Betul yang even kalau you tengok dalam industri perubatan sekalipun, kalau you tengok recently they talk about those who are the contract doctor kan, tak put into the permanent position kan. That is what actually. Adakah the government don't have enough money to recruit in the contract atau to put them into the permanent, ataupun kita dah excess of the medical doctor. That kind of thing lah. Even you talk about engineering pun sama juga. Many people, many students, you talk about education, dia been trained to be an engineer, but akhirnya they are not doing their engineering work. Sama juga, dia belajar LLB, tapi dia do the general administration work. Jadi di manakah arah tuju kita? Preparing skill workers, those related field dan sebagainya. Jadi I don't think so. This is apalah. Okay, Yang, thank you very much.
Plus at the end, most of our citizens join the gig economy, where the e-hailing, food panda and all that.
Betul.
Definitely a waste of talent lah, kan.
Yes.
So okay, probably kita boleh go back to Cik Zul. Encik Zul boleh tak share with us your opinion on if Malaysia is Malaysia still macam strong in terms of exporting and importing, atau kita are neck to any of our neighbouring countries?
Okay, kalau kita nak kata between exporting dengan importing, definitely kita memang bergantung kepada import juga, sebab kita banyak mendapatkan bahan mentah daripada luar negara. Ibu contoh makanan pun, raw material untuk elektronik punya parts. Tapi pada masa yang sama, kita juga banyak fokus kepada ekspor. Sebab ekspor ni yang saya perasan, kalau kita kata over the years, made in Malaysia product ni dah menjadi kiranya satu benda yang di peringkat antarabangsa orang yakin. Kiranya itu pada saya punya pendapat lah. Kalau kita kata produk daripada Malaysia ni berkualiti dan harganya, kalau harganya kiranya mampu milik dan berkualiti, so dia memang dicari di luar negara. Memang kalau kita daripada contoh macam saya punya bidang kerja sendiri, kita nak menggalakkan kita punya usahawan, kita punya businesses, kita punya entrepreneurship, syarikat-syarikat SME di Malaysia untuk menceburi ataupun pandang ekspor ni sebagai salah satu kiranya pasaran untuk diterokai. Sebab memang kalau kita ambil contohlah sebelum ni, contohnya durian. Macam mana penerimaan durian di China? Untuk kita, durian tu biasa sampai ada satu tahap apabila contohnya untuk pasaran China, diorang sukakan produk import yang eksklusif. Contohnya macam sekarang ni durian, kalau macam kita mungkin biasa je, tapi di pasaran antarabangsa, durian adalah satu yang kiranya premium item. Premium item yang harganya mahal, macam satu simbol kemewahan ataupun gaya hidup. So ada produk-produk di Malaysia yang incorporated ataupun masukkan durian dalam bahan-bahan dia, dalam produk-produk dia, dan produk-produk macam ni memang mendapat sambutan di luar negara. So memang kalau kita nak, kalau pada saya punya pendapat, memang kita actually banyak syarikat Malaysia yang mengeksport ke luar negara. Ada yang saya jumpa tu sebelum ni produk dia tak dijual pun di Malaysia. Dia keluarkan produk tu dengan kiranya dia punya target, dia punya tu untuk mengeksport ke luar negara. Bila saya tanya kenapa nak buat ekspor? Oh, kalau kita ekspor, kita jual produk kita bukan dalam ringgit Malaysia. Mungkin dekat Malaysia kita jual RM2. Kalau dekat US, 2 USD. Ada perbezaan dari segi foreign exchange apa semua. Dan bila dia bawa nama Malaysia tu, kiranya dia dipercayai, kiranya orang recognize sebagai produk yang berkualiti. Dan dia market di luar tu tentulah kiranya potensi lagi besar, persaingan tak macam dalam market dalam Malaysia lah. Macam kita persaingan untuk dalam pasaran domestik boleh saya katakan agak tepu jugalah, sebab kita ada lebih 1 juta company yang kalau saya ingat saya yang berdaftar dengan SSM.
Saturated.
Ya. So memang kita fokus kepada ekspor jugalah.
Bagaimana dengan kita punya halal? Adakah sama bila produk halal kita diekspor luar negara? Adakah sama acceptance dia?
Okey, bila kita kata dekat halal ni, dia bukanlah satu kiranya keutamaan, dia adalah satu bonus. Sebab bila kita dekat luar negara, yang mana kalau rakyat dia, majoriti populasi dia bukan, dia tak faham pun halal ni apa. Bagi dia halal ni untuk orang Islam saja. Actually kalau ikut daripada untuk dapatkan persetujuan halal tu, produk ni bersih, selamat untuk digunakan. So secara umumnya produk ni untuk semua. Cuma kefahaman tu tak ada. Jadi diorang punya understanding produk halal ni untuk Malaysia saja. So di pasaran antarabangsa, halal adalah satu bonus untuk produk-produk Malaysia ataupun produk-produk dari Malaysia terutamanya untuk menembusi pasaran lain lah. Memang kita punya halal adalah well recognized. Kiranya kita punya halal, JAKIM halal memang sangat sought after. Kita memang sangat tough nak dapatkan persetujuan JAKIM kita untuk halal. Memang kita kata macam Madrid pun kita anjurkan, kita kata pameran halal terbesar di dunia yang kita panggil Malaysia International Halal Showcase. Kalau sebelum ni tiap tahun kita buat, sebelum ni di KLCC, tapi 2018-2019 kita buat di Malaysia International Trade Exhibition Convention Center dekat MyTech dekat KL, yang mana kita bantu promote produk dan perkhidmatan daripada Malaysia yang carry halal punya brand ataupun halal punya feature ni. So memang actually halal ni is a new system lah. Kiranya dia benda yang baru. Kalau macam kita bagi kita benda tu penting. Tapi contohnya kalau dekat Amerika, halal tu second nature bagi dia. Dia bukan benda yang mandatory. Kecuali untuk orang Islam lah. Dia kalau dekat mereka dia ada kosher.
Kosher, yes. Okay.
Yes, dan kalau dari segi certification, diorang akan tengok USFDA kalau untuk produk makanan ataupun produk kecantikan. Dan kalau saya nak tambah sikit, pensijilan setiap negara ni berbeza-beza. Ada negara yang perlu kita ikut. Kalau macam China, dia nak kita ikut dia punya requirement. Indonesia pun ada requirement dia sendiri. Contohnya macam India pun dia ada requirement dia sendiri. Setiap negara requirement dia berbeza. So untuk ekspor ni, bila kita nak masuk satu negara, kita kena sesuaikan produk kita mengikut peraturan dan ketetapan yang telah ditetapkan lah. Kena ada pensijilan, kena ikut requirement lah.
Macam mana kalau countries yang bukan Muslim countries lah, I would say kan? Would their requirements, first priority requirement dia orang apa? Adakah macam tadi Cik Zul mention FDA kan? So apa lagi antara top requirement for those yang bukan prioritize halal ni?
Okay, kalau kita nak kata requirement dia, actually setiap negara ni berbeza-beza lah. Dia akan tengok semula balik kepada apa produk ataupun apa kandungan produk yang dibawa masuk tu. Contohnya mungkin kita tak boleh nak ekspor daging ataupun ayam, kan, itu contoh dia. Ataupun ada negara dia tak terima import ayam ataupun daging. Macam antara produk-produk yang kiranya produk-produk protein makanan ni memang agak sukar jugalah untuk dieksport ke luar negara.
What about macam GMO? Ada tak countries mentioning on the restriction on GMO?
Actually ada. Memang adalah. Kalau kita kata sekarang ni, kalau perasan tadi Datuk Samsul ada sebut ESG. Kan? Okey. Sekarang ni kita disebabkan ada kerisauan terhadap kiranya perubahan secara global dari segi kenaikan suhu, ais cair dekat Arktik apa semua. Kiranya ada kesan. So diorang dah mula, kita panggil, ada satu term dipanggil sustainable. Kalau di bawah United Nations dia ada introduce Sustainable Development Goals, SDG, ada 17 item dalam SDG ni. Kiranya kelestarian untuk banyak perkara lah. Ada certain negara yang dia punya requirement, produk GMO, kalau produk tu declare dia GMO tak boleh lebih sekian-sekian requirement. Katakan peratusan tu tak boleh lebih daripada 0.01. Contohnya, ada negara yang requirement dia macam tu. Contohnya kalau kita kata bab pensijilan lah, saya ambil kita punya contoh negara terdekat, kita punya negara jiran, Indonesia. Untuk pasaran Indonesia ni, kita tahu populasi dia ramai orang Islam macam Malaysia. Dia ada halal dia juga. Tapi yang uniknya, dia tak terima kita punya pensijilan halal.
Oh, our halal is not.
Dia kalau untuk produk Malaysia, kalau produk makanan, produk yang berkaitan, terutamanya produk makanan nak masuk ke pasaran Indonesia, dia perlu mendapatkan satu sijil yang dipanggil BPOM daripada bahagian pengawasan ubat dan makanan. Dia kena fulfill requirement dia, walaupun benda tu halal, dia ada standard dia sendiri. Itu yang saya nak cakap tadi.
So memang kalau kita nak ekspor barang buatan Malaysia tu, banyaklah dia punya barriers, and kalau these barriers are taken down, it would be easier for us to export lah. Betul tak?
Okey, betul. Tapi yang penting bila mana-mana pun untuk kita ekspor, kita nak kena study sikit lah. Kita nak kena tahu apa keperluan dia. Kalau kita kata kita nak ekspor, bila kita kata nak ekspor, macam saya cakap awal tadi, pasaran dekat luar ni besar. So apa yang kalau kita kata untuk usahawan, apa yang penting ada selain daripada ada pensijilan, kena ada capacity, kena ada quantity, kena ada quality dan juga capacity. Sebab bila order, mungkin kalau kita hantar dekat kedai, dekat pasar raya dekat Malaysia, mungkin usahawan akan hantar 10 pallet, 1 pallet. Tapi bila untuk ekspor, dia akan bertukar. mungkin satu kontainer dia punya permintaan. So untuk usahawan kena ada satu kuantiti, yang kedua kena ada capacity lah.
So we have to macam plan betul-betul strategically how to export our product. You said that.
Betul.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we have discussed, actually we have come to end of our session 2. So we're going to move forward to Q&A, question from the audience. And I have one interesting question for Datuk Samsul. This is from Associate Professor Dr. Herman Shah Anwar. Okay. Question is, in facing globalization, how ready is our local energy industry to face competition from other renowned companies? Datuk, if you may share.
Okey, terima kasih. Ini Dr. Profesor Arman daripada UUM ke ni?
Yes, betul.
Apa khabar Dr. Sihat Dr. ya? We meet again dekat ni.
One of our participants today.
One of our participants. Thank you for the questions, man. So far as I'm concerned, we are ready, Doctor. Tak ada masalah. We should be able to compete with internationally with regards to in the local industrial punya electricity punya supply business industry. We have put our stamp. Tenaga has stamp in various countries juga. In terms of technology, I think we are quite okay because we have employed state-of-the-art technology within our system. We are talking about, in terms of risk management, we have input in place. Basically, whatever we have talked actually in terms of that VUCA situation, we have done our own analysis. We have looked at various aspects of the business. Cuma sekarang ni in Malaysia, we feel that we are still regulating the industry business, the electric supply industry punya business lah. Because kalau kita tak regulate then properly, the first impact that we'll see is actually increase of tariff lah. So we do not want actually that to become an issue in Malaysia when in terms of increase in terms of electricity tariff. That won't make people happy lah. So that's the reason actually we are still regulating the electricity supply industry so that we can manage the tariff lah. But in terms of competencies, skills, knowledge, readiness to compete internationally, I think there shouldn't be any problem. We are ready. I think quite a number of Malaysian companies have actually gone abroad actually to have a stamp in various countries. We got ourselves in UK. We got Pakistan, India, Turkey, and we are looking at various destinations also to go. So does our counterparts in Malakoff. They also have various businesses in Saudi, which we also venture in Saudi, in Shuaibah. They have, I think, in Bahrain. So the local Malaysians company are actually going abroad to have businesses all over the world. In terms of competencies, we are ready. We have quite a number of competent people who know about international business. We have representatives and officers in various countries. So I think we should be ready. But in locally, I think better for us to still regulate the supply industry lah, so that we are still in control of in terms of the electricity punya tarif lah. Yeah, that's the take from me, Dr. Hammer.
Yeah, so that's, I think I myself as a Malaysian citizen, I'm proud to hear that our Malaysia energy industry dah bertapak di negara lain. Exposure on tenaga nasional berhad tu is there already, and definitely one day orang luar pun akan ada confidence in our energy industry lah. Okay, so next, let me see. Okay, we have one question for Encik Taib. This is regarding social economy, I would say lah. This is from Rosie Manan. The question is that there is say that our food security won't last few years. Is it due to we focus on globalization more before? Meaning, does our food security in this country is reducing due to globalization because we have been focusing on exporting and importing? and all that. How about our country's food security, if you mention? Oh, sorry, Encik tadi.
As I mentioned earlier, we cannot just rely on our internal punya manufacturing ataupun agriculture, see. Dan kalau kita lihat kita masih lagi ekspor daripada luar lah. Makanan-makanan ni, makanan-makanan asas kita ni banyak lagi di ekspor, diimport daripada luar. Jadi kalau you talk about food security ni, kalau misalnya kita betul-betul merancang secara moden, secara yang lebih sophisticated, contohnya dari segi tangkapan ikan di laut dalam misalnya, kita tak boleh lawan di negara-negara lain, mereka dengan teknologi dan sebagainya. Kita masih lagi bersifat small scale lagi, di pesisiran pantai dan sebagainya. Jadi dari segi mengeluarkan makanan asas, protein, beras dan sebagainya, kita masih lagi belum mencapai ke tahap yang sepatutnya lah. Jadi ini membuktikan bahawa kita memang perlu bergantung kepada dunia luar, terutamanya negara-negara jiran kita. Walaupun kita tahu, kalau macam saya daripada Johor Bahru, kebanyakan hasil tangkapan ikan ataupun udang dan sebagainya bukan untuk pasaran tempatan, yang baik-baik ni semua dijual di Singapura, dan Singapura pula tu dia ada dasar dia, dia cuma beli barang yang baik-baik saja. Even sayur-sayur kita yang kita keluarkan di Cameron Highland pun pergi ke seberang tambak. Jadi di sini kalau kita lihat, adakah barang-barang keperluan ini untuk rakyat kita saja? Jawapannya tidak. Sebab di Johor Bahru sendiri, orang-orang Singapura setiap hujung minggu akan datang ke pasar-pasar di Johor Bahru untuk membeli barangan kita, kerana barangan kita ni murah. Jadi dia orang memang setiap minggu datang kepada kita. Di sebalik saya sebut tadi, kita tidak cukup. Kita tidak cukup dari segi keperluan asas. Dan kalau kita lihat dari segi pihak kerajaan, setengah-setengah barangan itu diberikan subsidi, macam minyak masak dan sebagainya. Ini adalah kerana apa? Kerana kalau tak diberikan subsidi, beras dan sebagainya, harga itu akan naik dan sudah tentu pengeluar barangan asas ini tadi tidak akan boleh bertahan dengan kemasukan barangan daripada luar. Jadi dari aspek food security ini, kita masih lagi perlu memberikan perhatian. Terima kasih.
Kita memang masih kena continue untuk bergantung bersama-sama lah. Macam apa yang kita ada, kita akan ekspor. Apa yang kita ada, apa yang kita tak ada, kita import. Apa yang kita tak ada, kita ekspor lah.
Sepatutnya kita mesti ada capabilities, untuk generate our own food untuk rakyat. Kita tak sepatutnya bergantung kepada pihak luar. Tapi masalahnya ialah rakyat kita sendiri pun tak suka makan beras kita. Rakyat kita sendiri pun nak makan beras panjang ataupun beras Thailand. Jadi di sini kebolehan kita untuk menghasilkan barangan tempatan itu juga perlu ditingkatkan, supaya akhirnya barangan kita menjadi kompetitif dan laku di pasaran antarabangsa, semacam mana mereka menjual barangan mereka kepada kita. Dan apabila kita sudah ada branding ini, maka rakyat kita akan mendapat pendapatan yang tinggi. Tetapi kalau misalnya barangan kita ini tadi tidak berapa laku, tak mendapat tempat, dari segi perolehan pendapatan rakyat kita akan rendah dan akhirnya nanti mereka akan berada di takuk yang sama saja, ya, dan akan mengalami financial difficulties yang akhirnya nanti akan memberi kesan kepada kesejahteraan hidup mereka sama ada for short term ataupun for the long term. Maka sebab itulah tak sudah-sudah since independent, kumpulan ini terus-menerus dibantu dalam bentuk geran bot, geran minyak, bantuan sara hidup. Adakah Malaysia baru merdeka semalam? Malaysia sudah merdeka tahun 57. Tapi industri ini didapati seperti tidak dapat bertahan. Jadi dari segi food security ini sebenarnya satu industri yang boleh menjana pendapatan negara dan pendapatan rakyat.
Ya, betul. Sebab I agree that kita ada banyak areas kita boleh improve in agriculture. That when kita improve in our R&D agriculture tu, kita punya food production pun will be better lah. Contoh macam ada banjir ke apa pun, sawah padi kita tak affected because dah ada R&D and all that. So yeah, I quite agree. Cik Taib.
Okay.
Well, we have one last question lah with Encik Zul. This is from Cik Nik Ahmad Faik. Okay. Soalannya adalah, apakah strategi terbaik bagi memastikan langkah yang akan diambil oleh kerajaan mampu melonjak ekonomi domestik dan dalam masa yang sama dapat berdaya saing, menarik minat pelabur luar dengan barangan kita lah. Okay, over to you Encik Zul.
Okay, mungkin boleh ulang sekali lagi yang soalan tadi?
Sorry. So, in short lah, saya bagi in short. Apa strategi terbaik yang Encik Zul would suggest to our policy makers? Macam mana kita nak berdaya saing dengan produk luar atau berdaya saing dengan pelabur luar untuk memastikan ekonomi kita ini dapat berdaya saing lah compared to others.
Okey, kalau kita kata untuk meningkatkan daya saing ataupun untuk stay kompetitif lah kita katakan.
Adakah macam digital ke atau macam mana?
Digital tu kiranya adalah satu tools lah, satu alat kiranya untuk bantu kita punya usahawan ataupun kita punya syarikat-syarikat buat promosi untuk dia punya produk. Tapi kalau kita kata dari segi macam mana nak stay kompetitif, saya rasa Encik Taib tadi ada sentuh sikit pasal ni, yang mana kita kena tambah baik kita punya produk, kita punya kualiti, dan kalau dari segi, sebab yang kalau kita rasakan sekarang ni kos sara hidup naik, tapi kita punya pendapatan yang macam Encik Taib tadi, kita punya tangga gaji tu masih lagi rendah. Itu yang menyebabkan salah satu faktor tambahan yang mana kemasukan di ekonomi ni kiranya orang dah berubah. Dia akan buat lebih pada satu kerja untuk dia kiranya maintain dia punya gaya hidup ataupun untuk dia survive. So kalau yang pertama ni saya rasa dari segi untuk kalau produk kita kompetitif, kita kena tambah baik itu punya produk. Kita kena mula melihat kepada aspek kelasterian untuk jangka masa panjang supaya produk tu boleh berkekalan. Banyak yang terjadi sekarang ni, negara-negara di luar negara dah mula melihat kepada aspek sustainable ni. Contohnya kalau kita kata kita merujuk kepada sekarang ni, kalau kita kata palm oil punya plantation di Malaysia, contohnya sebelum ni ada pernah US ban kita punya import of palm oil disebabkan kita punya human labour kat Malaysia. Okey, syarikat di Malaysia dituduh mengamalkan ataupun menindas pekerja-pekerja asing. So untuk jangka masa panjang kita kena berubah. Dari segi peraturan, dari segi human labour apa semua, kita kena ke arah yang lebih lestari. Kalau katakan contoh untuk ladang sawit kena ada MSPO, Malaysian Standards untuk palm oil. Kiranya itu untuk jangka masa panjang kita kena ke arah yang lebih lestari, lebih sustainable lah. Itu saya punya pandangan.
Sebab seperti macam Datuk Samsul bagi tahu pun tadi, a lot of third parties are mentioning about sustainability, pushing us towards sustainability. So definitely those yang companies and products that are according to the situation now, which is kelestarian tu, pastinya akan lebih kompetitif lah daripada kita. Okay, so I think we just nice we have arrived to our end of our Q&A session. Before I pass to Amir for closing remark, I would like to say thank you so much to all the panels for your session and your sharing. So I pass to Amir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Yang, for being a very excellent moderator for today's event. So I would like to say my deepest thank you to our honourable speakers, Datuk T.S. Samsul, Mr. Taib and Mr. Zulkarnain, for sharing with us very eye-opening opinions and viewpoints on globalization and deglobalization. So as we know, globalization and deglobalization is a very interesting topic to be discussed by industry leaders and also in the academic world. The world we live in is interconnected, as mentioned by Datuk previously, and we cannot escape from globalization. And also globalization has its own advantages to our country, which will improve the business activity, economy, and also human livelihood. So as for that, I would like to take this opportunity to sincerely apologize for any issues arise before and during this event. And we are very grateful for your participation. And to all participants, thank you very much for your attention and attendance. So that's all for my closing. I will pass back to MC. Aiman, please. The floor is yours.
Unmute, Aman.
Terima kasih, Amir.
Ya.
Terima kasih, Amir. Tuan-tuan dan puan-puan, sekarang kita sudah pun berada di penghujung majlis. Di kesempatan ini, saya ingin mengucapkan ribuan terima kasih kepada Encik Zulkarnain, Datuk Syamsul dan Encik Muhammad Taib kerana sudi menjadi panel serta berkongsi ilmu dan pengalaman yang amat hebat. Tiada ungkapan yang boleh saya ucapkan kerana kagum dengan perkongsian kalian. Saya juga ingin mengucapkan berbanyak terima kasih kepada semua yang masih setia bersama kami sehingga ke penghujung majlis. Saya harapkan perkongsian pada hari ini sedikit sebanyak dapat memberi ilmu yang baru dan bermanfaat kepada tuan-tuan dan puan-puan. Pemenang cabutan bertuah akan dihubungi oleh pihak kami dalam masa yang terdekat. Saya tutup majlis kita pada hari ini dengan serangkap pantun. Bunga seroja di atas para, jatuh ditimpa buah berangan. Andai kata tersilap bicara, kemaafan jua kami pohonkan. Assalamualaikum dan semoga kita berjumpa lagi.
Waalaikumsalam. Terima kasih.